Hello, I'm Olivia Mattis. I'm delighted to welcome you on behalf of the Sousa Mendes Foundation. At our foundation, we honor a hero, a Portuguese hero. We tend to have stories to do with World War II. Today's story is different. It's a story from, well, from many centuries of history, but it does have to do with the Iberian Peninsula. We try to bring our programming back to the Iberian Peninsula as often as we can. And today is one of those days. So I learned a lot watching Dani Rotstein's beautiful film, and he's here with us in person, as is another panelist, both of whom will be introduced by my colleague, Mariana Abrantes. Mariana and I have been working very closely with partners in Portugal on the new Sousa Mendes Museum, which will be opening this summer on Sousa Mendes's birthday, July 19th. And so that's what we're doing behind the scenes as we also present these programs to you. So please put Portugal on your travel agenda sometime after July 19th of this year. So Mariana, this is your first time hosting with us in a little while. So welcome back and thank you for moderating this program. The floor is yours, Mariana.
Thank you, Olivia. I am Mariana Abrantes, and I am speaking to you from Portugal, from Majorca, the village where the Sousa Mendes family has its origins. Like many other peoples, Jews moved westward across the Mediterranean, perhaps with the Phoenician traders who gave the name to Lisbon, Alicipo, certainly with the Romans in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Like most of the Iberian Peninsula, Majorca had a continuous and significant Jewish presence from the 2nd century, thriving and tolerated under the Muslim rule, even after the Christian reconquest in the 13th century. But as we will hear, as you've seen in the movie, forced conversion and later the expulsions forced Iberian Jews to leave and go underground. The Inquisition spread throughout Iberia and the territories, increasing risks. In Majorca, the persecution increased, even as well as in the rest of the Iberia. Survivors became skilled at maintaining a double identity of people living in a world of terror. Fast forward to the 20th century, to a time of reveal and revival. In 1917, a Polish engineer named Samuel Schwartz discovered hidden Jews in Belmonte, near Castelo Branco, in the interior of Portugal. Belmonte now has a new synagogue and has become the headquarters of the new Rota de Judiarias, which includes over a dozen towns and cities in Portugal. Another event in 1921, the military officer and World War I hero, Arthur Barros Basto, had reclaimed his own Jewish heritage in Porto. He learned Hebrew and converted to Judaism in Morocco. He returned to Porto and started to look for hidden Jews and to rebuild the Jewish community. This culminated with the inauguration of Mekor Haim Kaduri Synagogue in 1938, with the support of the Morano committees in London and Amsterdam. Around the same time, it appears, in the 1930s, the Xuetas, the hidden Jews of Mallorca, gained new visibility, as we will learn today. The values of diversity and peaceful coexistence and tolerance that we need so much in the world today are, I hope, reinforced by this circular trend. But despite these parallel trends, most of us have been quite unaware of our local Jewish history and the suffering involved and of the contributions to the local society. And restoring these memories of the Jewish communities is very important to correct historical perspectives, to allow individuals and families to affirm their own identities, and to make our communities more elastic and inclusive and diverse. So we will hear more about that. Later, I will come back and present your questions, which are an important part of our meeting today. Please place your questions in the chat box. And now I will, on behalf of the Sousa Mendes Foundation, welcome our speakers. Today we'll hear from Candela Tsipora Bonin, who is a student and aspiring poet who grew up in Majorca in a family of Xuetas. Candela speaks 3 languages and currently lives in Germany, where she's pursuing an international education. She's active in Limud, with the Limud Mallorca, which we'll hear about. And she has also organized events in Göttingen for the youth community in Germany. Obviously, she enjoys spreading awareness of this important hidden Jewish history. But first, we will hear from Dani Rotstein. He's an American who moved to New Jersey to the Majorca in 2014. There he learned of the taboo history of the local Conversos. In 2018, he founded Limud Mallorca and has run over 50 successful events promoting diversity and inclusion in the small and yet growing Jewish community. During confinement, he began connecting with Jewish and non-Jewish guides all over the world and with communities seeking quality programming. In 2022, he produced and co-directed the documentary film that you have seen, Xueta Island, which is making its way through international film festivals. Dani, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for a wonderful introduction. And thank you to Matthew and Olivia and everyone at the Xueta Mendes Foundation for inviting us and allowing us to share our story, the story of the Xuetas, our film. I'm hoping that everyone here has been able to see it. If not, I do know that it'll be available for a couple more hours today. On behalf of the entire Xueta Island team, that's Ofer Lazawicki and Felipe Bolokita, the other 2 co-directors for the film. We're just really, really excited that we get to share our film with you all. So thank you for the organization. Before even getting into a little bit of how I got to Majorca and giving you a couple slides that we prepared for you today, I actually wanted to share a little music video clip. It's kind of VIP behind the scenes. It's not really available online. And it's actually an original song that we made for the film that you would have heard at the beginning and at the end. And it just shows a bunch of clips from the film. So perhaps you saw the film a couple days ago. This will hopefully rejig your memory to come up with the really great questions that we're really excited to offer hopeful answers to. So please do put those questions because we love that part. So Matthew, if you'd love to share the music video clip.
Keep on trying, keep on believing, I keep on hoping all my life. I keep on trying. I keep on hoping, keep on believing, I keep on trying. Keep on hoping, I keep on trying, keep on believing all my life. Yeah, no. Keep on hoping, keep on believing, I keep on hoping. All my life.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah?
Good. We can do another.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for putting that video on, and hope everyone enjoyed getting brought back to when you saw the film and the images there. Basically, I wanted to start off by saying how I got to Mallorca. Everyone always thinks that I kind of moved there because I heard of the Xueta story and I went there to investigate and make the documentary film. No, none of that is what happened. The real fact of the story is that I grew up in New Jersey. My father's Israeli, my mother's from Westchester, New York, and I got a job. I landed a job as a producer for a TV commercial production company in Mallorca. And when I moved to Mallorca, I'd never been there before. I spoke Spanish already. And I really thought I was going to be the only Jewish person on the island. Spain, unfortunately, does not have a very large Jewish community today. While at work, I was speaking about my father being from Israel, and the person at work said, "Oh, you should go see the synagogue." And I was like, "Oh, the one that I have to go underground to and go through the ruins? Yeah, I love, an archaeological dig. That's great." And he said, "No, it's available. It's open. You can go on, Friday nights. I think it's when you guys go." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's true." So I had to really do some research to find out. It was no website, no Facebook. It was kind of like I'm not going to say secret synagogue, but it wasn't easy to access. And I went on a Friday night, and I remember very clearly, there was 14 men in the men's section. It is an Orthodox shul started by British expats in the 70s, is what I would later find out. And if you've seen the film, then we talk about it as well. And I remember very clearly there being 14 men in the men's section. And when we got to the Barhu, or the Kaddish, the leader, who's not a rabbi, not a chazan, he's just a volunteer who leads Friday nights. He's from Argentina. He said very clearly, "We don't have a minyan, so we have to skip these prayers." And I couldn't understand because the number for a minyan is 10. And I remember there were 14 men. So I asked the person next to me, "Why are we skipping if there's a minyan? There's 14 men here." And the person said to me, "Well, that's obvious. Some of these men are not Jewish. They're Xueta." And that was the first time I heard this word Xueta. I had studied Inquisition and Sephardic history in college. I lived in Madrid for a year, and I had never heard this term Xueta. I had heard of the derogatory term marrano, which some of you might be familiar with, which comes from Spanish. It means pig. It's like someone who's a swine, dirty animal. We shouldn't be using that word. We should be saying converso, and we're going to talk about that later. But this word, Xueta, is only from here. It's from Majorca, and it's actually Mallorquin, which is the dialect of Catalan. So it's actually a Catalan word. And there's a couple places of where this word might come from. And if you haven't seen the film yet, the word Xueta means that these are Catholic descendants of the Jewish Conversos, only from Majorca Island. They're not from anywhere else, not from Barcelona, from Ibiza, just Mallorca. So there's some theory that it might come from French. Chien means dog, and chouette is like a female owl, a dark, ominous bird. These are not nice things that you would call people. Again, pretty derogatory. I personally don't think it comes from French because we don't speak French here in Mallorca. We speak Catalan. So I think the next theory is more accurate, which is xuya. Xuya means bacon or pork. And this comes from the idea, if you see the picture below, of people cooking outside, there is legend, and I believe it to be true, that because everyone knew who the Xuetas were, right? They had these one or two of these 15 last names that were hanging on a convent for 400 years. So everyone knew who the Xueta people were. They always lived in a certain area. These Xueta people would cook bacon and pork outside their home to show people that they are no longer keeping kosher. They're no longer Jewish. They just want to fit in. They want to assimilate with the rest. Now, maybe some of those Xuetas were actually crypto Jews, meaning secret Jews, and they were doing this outside their home, cooking and using bacon and pork, but not having it come inside their home. Again, I think it's a very small percentage of people who are actually trying to, hold on to their, Jewish rituals and traditions. The last theory here is Jueu in Catalan, which means Jew. And a not nice way to call someone Jewish is Jueto, you little Jew. So again, it's diminutive, it's derogatory. For hundreds of years, it was not a word that you would want to hear. If you look at the picture there below, it says Carrer del Jueus with a little menorah, Street of the Jews. And that's an actual street that I take people on our tours when you're visiting us in Majorca. Next slide, please. So it's very important to understand some key important dates when you're looking at the history of Jewish, Xueta, and Converso here in Majorca. Basically, there are Jews here since the 400s. That's when we've seen documentation of Jews living on the Balearic Islands. And then up until 1435, which is when the mass conversion took place, that's when hundreds of Jews were forced to go into the Church of Santa Eulalia. Now today, it's almost known as the Church of the Conversos. And in 1435, that's when there ceased to be a Jewish community anymore in Majorca. They were all converted. Some were able to escape and get away as well, but no Jews were left. In 1492, when the Jews were expelled from Spain, no Jews left Majorca because 60 years before that, they had already been converted. So then you have this interesting period of 1435 to 1691, where we know that there are crypto Jews, again, secret Jews. They're also called Conversos, and they're also called new Christians because they just became Christian. We know for certain that many of them were keeping secret Jewish practices, like celebrating the holiday of Purim. They called it the Feast of Saint Esther. They would do things with food. They would try to keep Shabbat. We do have records in the Inquisition about them trying to get together for Yom Kippur in the 1670s. And the Inquisition was very active, right? They were constantly torturing people, taking people's possessions, burning people at the stake. It's been very, very awful. And in fact, in 1691, that was one of the most terrible autos de fe, when three crypto Jews said in a loud voice that they were born Jewish and they want to die Jewish. And they were burned alive in front of 30,000 people that day in 1691, which you learn about in the film. And after 1691, that's when you start to hear this derogatory term called Xuetas, people who come from the Jews, and no one wanted to marry them. That's why the Xuetas have been marrying within the same group of people up into the 1920s, 1930s, roughly. They were also called people of Segel Street, and just people of the street. They don't even get to, have an area where they're from. They're just from the street. Next slide, please. So these are the Xueta last names, the 15 Xueta last names: Aguiló, Bonin, Cortez, Forteza, Fuster, Martí, Miro, Pico, Pina, Pomar, Segura, Taronji, Valentí, Valeriola, and Vaz. If you have one of these last names and your family is from Majorca, you are Xueta, which means that you come from medieval Jews. They come from the Jewish Conversos, and before that, the medieval Jews of Majorca. Joan Miró, the famous artist, he is not Xueta because his family has always been from Barcelona. But if you ever meet someone whose last name is Miró and their family was from Majorca, you would know that they are Xueta. Next slide, please. So this is just a little idea you would have seen in the film, of a nice scene about the film with Tomé Arbona. We do believe that the challah had lard be put into it, and now that's why we eat something called the ensaimada, which is made of lard here in Majorca. It is spiral now, but it used to be braided. So we do think that some Jewish roots have come down through the centuries, and this very famous pastry here in Majorca, the ensaimada, might have actually come from the Jewish challah from medieval times when there was a large Jewish community here on the island. Next slide, please. This is a really famous book, and Mariana brought it up before in the 1930s with Samuel Schwartz, who kind of quote unquote discovered, the secret Jews in Belmonte. Baruch Brownstein, a rabbi from New York, actually, from the JTS, he comes to Majorca and he goes to Madrid and he opens up the Inquisition records and he writes this incredible book in 1936. I highly recommend all of you to buy it on Amazon or wherever you can. It's one of 3 books. That's it. 3 books written originally in English about the Xuetas. This is a topic that I found had not been really explored, certainly in the English language, and was kind of what prompted us to make this film. Next slide, please. So here we have a photo from Limud Mallorca. This is the organization that my wife Carla and I started, that Candela is involved in, and many other volunteers in Mallorca. This is our second conference, actually. Over 150 people came from Israel, from England. Some of you might be familiar with the Limud organization. It's a conference that celebrates the diversity of Judaism, saying you can, learn about food and literature and film and Torah and Rikud and so many things that, make up the Jewish culture, Jewish faith. And it was really exciting to have the Catholic choir come and sing Hatikva for us and Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, among other songs. And Luis Forteza, the choir director, who's standing next to me in the photo there, he is Xueta, but he's a practicing Catholic. But he's very proud of his Jewish roots, which is why he, on his own accord, taught his Catholic choir to sing the Hebrew song Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. I heard him performing that in another concert, and that's when I asked him if he would come to our Limud conference. Next slide, please. And this is just a couple images, basically to show you about a hopeful revival that we're still trying to make happen here. We actually are teaching about the Holocaust in public schools. I myself come from Holocaust refugees. They escaped the Nazis in Germany, my grandparents, and made it to the States. We also are talking about the Xuetas. We have public schools come and do tours with us where you can see all the students holding up the 15 last names. And without fail, there's always at least one or two students that will look down and say, that's my last name. And so now they're learning about this kind of hidden history that is not really talked about in the homes and certainly not in school. Next slide, please. We did virtual tours during the pandemic. We did a virtual Shazoom where we had Shabbat like online before Shabbat came in Catalan, in English, and in Spanish. There was a beautiful article written in the BBC news story about the work that we've been doing here. We had dinners on Friday night. There's not that much activity happening currently, especially after October 7th. There's, sadly, not as much activity as we'd like to in terms of us getting together. But we still have built a very strong community. And again, the Xuetas who have returned to Judaism are the leaders and the ones who are, let's call it, attending services and pushing on the observance, the rituals, the prayers of our community as much as possible. Next slide, please. And I believe this is our final slide. So we made a documentary film. There's destination weddings taking place. We spoke about the Xueta choir, or I should say the Xueta director, who sang for us at our event. And this is a scene from the movie. We had a beautiful Rosh Hashanah event with the help of the City Hall. So this is really exciting that the City Hall and the city authorities are helping us, do Jewish cultural events, celebrate Jewish holidays in a public and open way, where before, from 1970s to the basically 2000s, the Jewish community, the synagogue would always kind of do things more closed. And now we're trying to open it up to allow this to be as an open and as inclusive community as possible. Cannot wait to get your questions at the end. Right now, I'd like to pass the floor to my colleague and friend, Candela Bonin.
Hi, good morning, guys. How are you? I hope you're great. So my name is Xueta Bonin Iberet. As we can see, I have like these Xueta surname called Bonin, and that comes from my grandparents. So here is my grandparent, Josep Bonin Forteza. As we can see, he has these two Xueta surnames, and it was an event because my grandmother, that it was Maria Margalida Sanso, was the first non-Xueta member family in our family. So that was very risky at the time, and it was when these first interreligious marriages, I would say inter-ethnic communities marriages began to take place. So she had to face and leave part of her family that was not supporting the decision to go with a Xueta person, and it was such an event in our family that a first non-Xueta person came. So we can see that I think almost all Xueta families have like a crest that are very proud. So here is my Xueta family crest, that is Bonin, and we can see that it has like these some elements that represent the family. And I think it's very important to have like these symbol of our heritage represented. And I think you can find it in a lot of houses or typical houses from Xueta. I have family, like friends of mine, Xueta's friends of mine that have like these family crests in their houses, because represents also to be proud of who we are. Also, another tradition from the Xuetas is passing by the jewelries that we have, because normally the Xueta community were doing jewelry. Well, they were like making jewelry, and they had like jewelry shops and also like silver factories and everything. My family owned like a silver factory in a little town in Majorca, and my grandma gifted me this piece of jewelry that my family did, like the last piece of jewelry that my family did. So it was very awesome, and I'm very grateful. And I think it's a tradition to just passing by these little pieces of history and heritage, and also to be proud of what we made and who we are. So yes, I think it's very beautiful to still have it. Can we please go to thank you. So as we can see, these family crests, we can find it in some places, for example, the jewelry shops where Xueta families owned, or also to the houses. So we can see like a family crest hidden in the basement of a jewelry shop. And this crest is from the Aguilo family, that is also like a Xueta family. So yes. And it was like next to a silent mural, and it was like with a drawings that represented freedom and liberty. And I think it's very beautiful, this drawing that the Xueta painter made, that it just like represented the freedom and liberty that the Xuetas and the community was searching, because they were not freely to express their religious and their ethnicity and their traditions, and they were facing by several society conflicts. So here we can see the Xueta painter trying to express their desires. And here we can see another painter, painting from the same painter, and it's just like this boat that I think it also mentions when some Xueta members of the community tried to escape from Majorca and go to other places in search of freedom. For example, there were a lot of people migrating to Italy, Livorno. And also, I think it's very important how the painter connects this searching of freedom with the sea, you know, that as a little island where we're coming from, it's very important to be connected with that, and also to search for new hopes and yes. Also, the Xueta community was living, like very divided from the society, I would say. So in the old city of Palma, they were placed in a Jewish quarter, and here we can see like in the red dot, it's where it was placed, and next to it we can see these green 2 dots that were the churches, because they say that was a synagogue, an old synagogue, and they transformed it into a church, but it's quite of a myth, I would say. And next to it, as we can see, the Inquisition settled next to the Jewish quarter, so they can have an easy accessibility to the ghetto and to see if they were still practicing crypto Judaism, or they were still, eating pork or everything, if they were still Jewish. So we can see the next slide. Right now, if you go to the old city of Palma and you visit the Jewish quarter, you can still find these little pieces and clues of the history that was in Majorca. So here in the Jewish quarter, we can see this street that is called Monte Zion, that is a Jewish symbol, that we can still see in the old streets of Palma where the Jewish quarter was placed. And in Majorca, the Jewish quarter was called Alcall. So that in Catalan, it has like the name in it. So, yes. And also in this Jewish quarter, there's like this story that happened in which 2 Jews from the medieval times, Moises Fokim and Magaluf Natyar. So Moises Fokim was in love with the wife of Magaluf Natyar. So he built like this huge castle, like tower, so he can look better to his wife, the wife to his rival. And the husband that was very, very angry, he said, okay, you cannot do that. You have to destroy the tower. And he was like, well, no, you cannot do that. So he told the monarch, and the monarch just like told Moses Fokim to destroy the tower 12 times. So I think it's very amazing that still we have these stories in the old city of Palma, and we have like this big, like this drawing that was painted not long time ago that still represents a little piece of story of Mallorcan Jews on medieval times in the streets of Palma. So also the response of the Mallorcan society towards the Xueta community was very harsh. And as the Xueta community was marginalized from society by several factors and aspects, we can see, for example, these folkloric poems that Mallorcan society made. And we have it translated because they're originally in Catalan. So for example, in English, we have, when they nailed Jesus, Pico hammered, Miro watched, Valls carried the flag, and all the other Xuetas followed behind. So we can see here two important keys that the folkloric poems put the surname, so they can distinguish the surnames towards these people, you know, from society, so they can know who is Xueta by distinguishing the surnames, and also by putting this Jewish guilt of killing Jesus. And the other one is my blood is pure, and I don't want to make it dirty. You already must know how dirty is to be Xueta. So it's very impressive and very shocking how the Mallorcan society expressed this hatred and hate towards the Xueta community. And also here we can understand why the Xueta had to marry one between the other ones, and they had to be separate from the society, as called them, dirty. And here we can see, like on the background, the Church of Mount Zion. And I took these pictures because I'm wearing in these pictures the t-shirt of Limud Mallorca. That is, we put the G in Mallorca, and I think it's very original. And it is because, well, I would like in the future also doing these tours with Dani and Joan Caldes, that are like two amazing persons. And I love their work too. Yeah. Showing the history of Majorca.
Great. Well, thank you for two beautiful presentations about this hidden history that I certainly knew nothing about. I do encourage the audience to continue putting their questions into the chat box. Dani has been answering some of the questions directly, but still we'll want Mariana to voice them so that we can all hear the questions and the answers. There's also a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of when we'll have the film available, because we had this agreement that it would be available till Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern. So I do hope that that can be honored. But right now I know Dani's trying to juggle another commitment. So watch it today if you can, but we are trying to get it available for you up until tomorrow, Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern time. And now let me tell you a little bit about our programs upcoming. So we have two more programs in the month of April. So our efforts to go on a little bit of a slower pace are not coming to fruition. We're still presenting these programs to you fast and furious. So we have a program next week, and we have a program a week after that. So next week, we are turning to the country of Belgium. We're turning back to World War II, and we're turning to a story that's very personal to me. My grandparents were deeply involved in the Jewish resistance in Belgium during World War II. My grandfather is actually in the film that you will be seeing. And they co-founded an organization called the Jewish Defense Committee, in French, Comité de Défense des Juifs. And they and the other members of the committee were posthumously honored by the B'nai B'rith in 2018 as Jewish rescuers of Jews. So I had the tremendous honor to travel to Israel for the ceremony and receive plaques on behalf of my grandparents and their work. And so we're presenting the story of this Jewish Defense Committee to you next week. The film centers on one of the members of this committee. Her name was André Golen. She's deceased now. And her role was to actually go and collect the children who were going into hiding and bring them to their hiding place. So she had the direct contact with the children. She wasn't the one making the decisions or finding the hiding places or all of that stuff, but she's the one who was in contact with the children. And she's the one that you'll see in the trailer that we will see in a minute. Let me now tell you about the program we have in 2 weeks' time. And that is a program called Courage to Care, where we're seeing a really beautiful film from the 1980s, I think it is. Elie Wiesel narrated the film, and the film takes you on a tour of this concept of Holocaust rescue from one country to another. That's the film that you'll see, but the program focuses on one specific story. We have Peter Hellman, who wrote this amazing book called Avenue of the Righteous, and he will be in dialogue with the son of a woman who was rescued in this extraordinary way. So it's a whole program on one story, but the film associated with it is a broader film. Hope that makes sense. So right now we're going to see a little trailer for the film that we're showing next week called Just a Link.
Je dis toujours, en 1942, j'étais rien du tout, hein, j'étais une jeune institutrice. 2 ans après, je crois que j'étais quelqu'un d'autre, quelqu'un de différent, quelqu'un qui avait mûri, quelqu'un qui avait beaucoup plus appris que pendant toutes les années d'école. Nous sommes dans un petit coin de l'Italie. Il y a des années que les enfants dont je me suis occupée pendant la guerre me demandent de raconter leur histoire, me demandent d'écrire leur histoire. Et je leur réponds chaque fois que c'est pas possible, que pour écrire, pour être loin des soucis quotidiens, des courses, de la vaisselle, des repas à préparer, il faut que je me retire dans un endroit isolé, un espèce de cloître. Et puis il y a 2 ans, je suis venue ici, invitée par des amis très chers, dans un lieu un peu monacal. Et là m'est venue l'idée d'écrire, de venir ici et d'écrire. On l'a raconté souvent, l'histoire de ces femmes, mais c'est ça que je voudrais faire en réalité. À la fois raconter l'histoire des enfants et raconter l'histoire de cette douzaine de femmes. Je dis souvent que c'est une douzaine de femmes qui se sont groupées contre la Gestapo. Et ces femmes, en réalité, une partie de ces femmes étaient des femmes juives, les autres ne l'étaient pas. Elles se sont donné la main pour enlever quand même 3000 enfants aux Allemands, 3000 enfants qui ne sont pas passés par les camps.
So please join us next week and the week following. So I see a flood of questions in the chat box, and Mariana, I don't envy you your task. Please moderate those questions.
Thank you, Olivia. Yes, I've been writing them down, but it's I think I'm a bit behind. So I will give Dani some questions to work on, Dani and Candela. one of the questions has to do with the interaction of the expatriate Jews and the Xuetas, and how that we heard about the problems with the minyan and so forth, but how is that moving forward? And then another question had to do with Portugal, that someone who came on a tour of the Jewish quarters, the Rota de Judiarias, that found that the tour guides never mentioned why there were no Jews. There were just buildings and vestiges here and there, and the person was left with the idea that the Jews being Jewish was still a secret in Portugal. I might treat that one as well, but that could be a question also for Dani and Candela. And then two other things. One is about the DNA. Since they have this intermarriage, are they more closer to the DNA of the ancient Jews because they have not married out? And the other question is how much of the Jewish traditions and practices did they keep over 500 years, and do they realize that these traditions were Jewish? I know that's a lot of questions. I still have another 5, so if you can take those while I look at the others, thank you. I'll start off with Dani first, and then Candela can add if she would like.
I was trying to frantically write them down as well, but I think I'm missing one. So you'll remind. I think it's the second one. I actually
Okay.
I didn't get to write down. But first, the first question about how is the Minyan doing and the JCC idea. You know, basically, if everyone remembers at the epilogue at the end of the film, a really big event happened. We filmed this in 2019, about 10 days of filming, actually. And then in 2021, after the pandemic, we were able to confirm a rabbi from Israel who is actually one of 2 rabbis in the world who are Xueta. I mean, Nicholas Aguilo is his original name. He is now Rav Nisan ben Abraham. He doesn't use that previous name. He grew up in Majorca as Xueta and made Aliyah, went to Israel in 1979, I believe, converted to Judaism, not because his mother was not Xueta and his father was. Just at that time in the 70s, there was really no such thing as doing a return. If you wanted to be Jewish, learn how to be Jewish, you have to go through, a strict conversion process. And so he did that in Israel. He became a rabbi. He's an ultra-Orthodox rabbi with 12 children. And he would come once a month for 10 days at a time for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, as of October 7th, we were unable to continue his contract. He was unable to leave Israel, and also the funds that we were receiving for his travel from Madrid were no longer continued. It's interesting. Now, the people who attend services the most and who are the most observant, let's call it, are actually many Xuetas and many Spanish people who've converted to Judaism. A lot of the Jews that are like expats like myself or immigrants, we didn't necessarily move to Majorca to struggle to find kosher food. There's no kosher restaurants in Majorca, it's very hard to be Shomer Shabbat. It's not an easy place to live a halachic, Jewish observant lifestyle. So what we try and do is get people together for holidays. We try and do conferences. We try and do film festivals. We try and find other ways for people to engage with their Jewish culture. And just the other 2 questions I can quickly answer is the DNA. Yes, absolutely. There are certain haploids. I believe the Cohen haploid that is found in the 20,000 people that have Xueta last names currently on the island. There was a huge DNA studies test done in the last 10 years, I believe. And they are finding that the DNA is more closely related to Sephardic Jews that are from Iraq and Iran, Persia, than there are from their next door neighbor who they've lived next to on the island, because there was never this intermarriage between Xueta people and non-Xueta people. It's fascinating. I'm not an expert on DNA studies at all, so I would encourage you to go online and to learn more about that. But it's a really incredible thing to learn about now. And the last thing I'll mention is the Jewish traditions. No, I wouldn't say there's people doing Jewish things, because you have to remember, everyone knew that who the Xuetas were. The Xuetas were some of the most practicing Catholics you'll meet on this island, because they're always trying to prove how Catholic they were to the rest of society. If you had this last name, no one would believe that you were a good Catholic. In fact, their own Catholic Church like prevented many Xuetas who wanted to move up in the Catholic Church and become priests and bishops. The Catholic Church wouldn't allow them because they had this bad blood. So again, they really lost everything of the Jewish traditions except some pieces. So a lot of them were jewelers and worked in jewelry stores. So you would see a menorah, you would see a Star of David being made by these Xueta families, in addition to all the crosses and rosaries that they would be making for the church and whatnot. And if you remember the film Pinchas, Tony Pina, the chef, he was passed down a knife from his family, the Xueta family, that said this is only to be used for killing the animal, for the slaughtering. So we do believe that knife would have come from his family. That might have been shochet previously. So those are some things that have been passed down, but no, there's not really a tradition. And that becomes an issue when someone walks into the synagogue and says, I have a Xueta last name, I want to count as a minion. You know what I mean? They might know nothing about Judaism. So is that fair for someone who doesn't have a Xueta last name, who converts to Judaism, has worked years to convert to Judaism and studied and learned and did everything? You know, is that fair that this person should come in and automatically count? Right now, they don't. They still have to go through a process of return, which is the same thing as a conversion. They have to learn about Judaism. They have to go in front of the Beit Din. They have to go into a mikvah. But at the end, if you have a Xueta last name, it'll say that you're returning to your ancestors' roots. It's not saying that you're converting to the Jewish people, but it's still the same process. You still have to reintegrate people to allow them to understand what it means to be Jewish and to learn all the things that is involved when leading a Jewish lifestyle, Jewish life. So that's my quick answers. Candela, I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Yes, I would like to add like something. So for example, I think you, Mariana, said that they were just like scared to express that they were Jewish, right? I think like in a very personal view, my granddad, well, suffered that. For example, I think the folkloric poems that I taught, were like folkloric poems that actually the Jewish, well, the non-Jewish, like the Christian guys in the schools chanted to my granddad, and he had like very traumatizing experience regarding having a Xueta surname, and that's why he always said, no, I'm not a Jew. And as Dani said, oh no, I'm the most Catholic guy in this school ever. And yes, I think also about the traditions, I think some tradition has passed down. For example, my grandma sometimes lights like candles on Friday, and it was like a tradition that my granddad showed her. And you didn't know why on Friday she lights some candles. It's a thing that you didn't understand, because in Majorca right now, mostly we're Christians, so you don't have like this Jewish background and you don't know what it's Shabbat. But you see these little things, and I also remembered my granddad, even if he said that he was not Jewish, he was still doing like these Jewish things. As for example, I remembered every time he entered to the house, he kissed like the door frame. And as I was like very little, I couldn't understand. And right now that I'm trying to enter in this Jewish world, and I also want to do the conversion, and I will do it like next year, because I will be 18. I'm beginning to understand some little things that I saw when I was very young, and also that some friends of mine mentioned me that were not normal. Like, for example, in my house, we didn't eat that much pork as my Majorcan friends did. And in Majorca, it's like the gastronomy that we eat there, it's normally like mostly pork. And we didn't eat that much pork, and it's like these little clues that just like show you the truth of your identity. So I think it's very curious also. But I think about the traditions now, the new generations are not that deep connected with the meaning, so they cannot follow it.
Thank you, Candela.
Yes.
I do have a couple of other questions. Somebody is saying they're going to come, and they ask if the Hotel Phoenix that she liked in 1950 is still there. So I'll leave that. Maybe it will have come back as a phoenix. There was a question about the Majorca harbored Jews in World War II, and I think that's an interesting item that perhaps we can talk about again a bit. I have a personal question as well, two personal questions. One, who's coming to the destination weddings? How many have you had? I think that's a great idea. And then the other one, more serious, is has to do with the parallels between what happened in Majorca and in other parts of the Iberian Peninsula, namely in Portugal, and even in some Latin American countries where people went and they became Catholic, but retained in some aspects of Jewish identity. So my question there is this parallel of, if you become visible, do you attract persecution and are then encouraged to go back underground and hide again? I hope this is not something that repeats itself. Dani, if you want to take that.
Sure. I can kind of knock off a bunch of these questions. The Hotel Phoenix still does exist. I personally have never been there before, so I'd have to go and check that out myself, but I could just look it up online, and it is still operational in Mallorca. World War II is fascinating. When I started getting into the Xueta history, I met a friend named Joan Perez, who was doing a documentary at the same time as we were about German Jews hiding in Mallorca in the 1930s. There were probably up to 100. There's a great other film that he ended up making called The German in the Photography Shop. I'd have to look it up and see how it can be shared or accessed. I just put my email address in the chat, so anyone feel free to stay in touch with us after the presentation today. But there were Nazis on Mallorca as well. And when Franco won the war, the Civil War in 1939, he deported the German Jews that were hiding here in Mallorca. And some of them actually took their own lives because they knew what was waiting for them back in Germany. Others had escaped. They left Mallorca and went to the States. And others, sadly, were taken to a concentration camp in the northern part of Spain and eventually sent to concentration camps in Germany. But it's incredible to think that there was a list going around of Xueta families. Remember, people who had been Catholic for 400 years, they had not been Jewish, since before 1435, that were going to be rounded up and sent to Italy, and then to Italy to the concentration camps. But a priest named Moreles got in the way and buffed up the numbers, saying if you were going to send anyone with Jewish roots in Mallorca, you would be sending 1 out of 3 people living here. So somehow, some way that convinced them not to do this plan. This one I'm sharing with you is all anecdotal and shared to me via oral history. Nothing documented is reflecting what I'm sharing. Destination weddings, yeah. I mean, a lot of people are coming to Mallorca. It's a beautiful place. We had our interfaith Jewish wedding. My wife would convert later, but at the wedding at the time, she was still not Jewish. And I'm actually helping people out officiating their weddings. They're not looking for a halachic wedding, although we do have Chabad in Barcelona that would come and do a halachic wedding if that was needed. But yeah, I'm there to facilitate if people want to have like a celebration. Then we do use Jewish traditions in those weddings. It's quite fun. And then the last thing, it's kind of a great segue. Are there parallels to other communities? The short answer is really no. Like the Xuetas of Mallorca, and I would say the crypto Jews of Belmonte and a couple of other places in Portugal are really specific because they were so insular and isolated for so many years. Like the crypto Jews in the mountains of Portugal, everyone knew who they were because there was so small of a group of population. They weren't able to assimilate as well. I've heard stories of people knowing, oh yeah, that town's full of Jews. Even though they're practicing Catholics, some of them were keeping some of the Jewish traditions that really kept alive over 600 years. It's incredible. With the Xuetas, it's different. People try to really, throw away their Jewish identity and try to assimilate, but the rest of society never let them because they had this last name. And so now it's incredible. It's very easy if you have one of the 15 last names, for those who are in the know, they could say, oh, you have Jewish roots. But the process is still not easy in terms of people being welcomed. I saw in one of the questions about, from Israel, that the Orthodox rabbis are the ones who just decide how you can convert or not. They don't accept, at least in Israel, reform conversions and conservative conversions. This is a problem, especially in Latin America. People are interested in learning about the Jews and connecting with either their lost Jewish identity or in general, the community today. And by putting up all these barriers and obstacles and making it really hard, are we really doing the right thing here? And we hear all about anti-Semitism and all this terrible things, the negative news. I want to hear more about philo-Semitism. Like, let's start using that word more, right? Like people who like Jews, who want to connect to Jews, who want to know about the Jewish community. I think that's where that we need to go. And I don't know if we have time, but I do have a trailer for the next film that we're working for that I would be excited to share with you all about this topic.
Olivia?
Let's share it in a just a little minute. Candela, are there some final words you'd like to mention to our audience?
Well, yes, about like the Second World War question, I think you can find some Stolpersteiner in Mallorca just regarding some Holocaust, diaspora victims in Mallorca, I would say as well. So yes, there's some stories.
I see. So yeah, Dani, there's a little clip. So let's go ahead and show that clip.
My name is Dani Rotstein, and I'm a documentary filmmaker. I want to tell you about an extraordinary phenomenon taking place in Latin America today. I actually had to go there myself to see if it was true. There are different Christian groups interested in converting to Judaism.
O sea, a mí si me dices, compruébame que eres judío, a lo mejor no te lo puedo comprobar, pero te puedo mostrar el corazón. Mi corazón es judío al 100%.
Mucha gente tiene mucha sed de judaísmo acá, quiere conocer, pero no hay una puerta abierta para eso.
Comencé a investigar mucho sobre el judaísmo. Fui a la comunidad judía y me dijeron que ellos no podían ayudarme.
Because people have been rejected by the established Jewish communities, they're going and forming their own. Now you have emerging communities going away from traditional communities. That's crazy.
Esta comunidad son todos conversos, menos yo.
Son dos tipos de exigencia. Aquí nos piden más observancia y allá nos piden mejor posición social.
Our plan is to create a documentary series that will shine a light on these unknown stories, highlighting their different hopes, experiences, and challenges.
Me decían, pero piénsalo bien, vas a ser discriminado por latino e agora vas a ser discriminado por judío. Ándate daqui, todavía sé feliz.
A sinagoga tem que estar aberta, a sinagoga não é museu, tem que estar aberta. Eu acho errado. Errado.
Right now, we are looking for producing partners to help prepare the project and secure funding so we can return to Latin America to tell this story completely.
Una de las cosas que tenemos que luchar es para sacar la palabra emergente de las comunidades. Ya emergió.
Fantastic. So Mariana, if there's some closing words you would like to say.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank our audience, lovely, and also, and especially our speakers. And to remind you, myself and you and all of us again about the importance of restoring and learning about these stories of persecution so that we can identify it early on. And we also celebrate the resilience, the revival. And as we've heard over the course of this session, to really focus on creating open and inclusive and elastic communities that are tolerant and more peaceful, mostly more peaceful. So
what
have
a
a good day.
Wonderful note to end on. So I wish everybody, first of all, a wonderful eclipse tomorrow. If anyone is in the path of the eclipse, don't forget to wear those sunglasses. Don't look directly at that sun. Thank you all. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to Mariana for moderating. Thank you, Dani, for making such a glorious film. And I wish everybody a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Be well, everybody. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.